Tonight on Bridge City News, reconciliation celebrations are on in Lethbridge as those who were involved in the 60s scoop are remembered. Science comes alive as the University of Lethbridge receives funding from Ottawa to support unique science programs for kids. And the death toll has climbed to 17 as Hurricane Florence continues to batter the Carolinas. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. An Ontario Liberal MP is crossing the floor to the Conservatives. MP Leona Alleslev said she was frustrated with the government's leadership on key files like the economy and foreign affairs. She says she was ignored on many occasions with concerns she brought to the Prime Minister.
After careful and deliberate consideration, I must withdraw from the government benches to take my seat among the ranks of my Conservative colleagues and join Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
This is the first floor crossing the Liberals have faced since Trudeau assumed leadership in 2014. Alleslev is a graduate of the Royal Military College, a former captain in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and held senior positions with the Department of National Defence and IBM before becoming a politician. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer has given Alleslev the portfolio of Global Security Shadow Minister. Earlier today, Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips was in town to make a grant announcement of $125,000. The funds were going to the Lethbridge Public School Board to boost funding for Indigenous programs. Minister Phillips says this funding has been sorely needed to help students be properly prepared for the school year.
So this is just another way that the province is making sure that we can serve all students' needs within, regardless of the school system that they are enrolled in. And that as our west side in particular grows, as our elementary school enrollment grows, that we're keeping pace with the kinds of needs that are identified within the city.
Certainly some of the things that we've taken a look at and thought about is the potential focus on literacy in the early years for students who may be identified as being behind in literacy scores. We've taken a look at what are some of the ways we can support school to work transition, school to post-secondary transition for some of our urban Indigenous youth, and what are some of the ways that we can support have some success in high school through success coaches.
Reconciliation celebrations are now underway in Lethbridge and will continue for the next couple of weeks. Today's events included a pipe offering, a flag-raising ceremony at City Hall, and even some speaking engagements at Galt Gardens. Reconciliation celebrations started last year, and this year's will continue until next Friday when schools will be participating in Orange Shirt Day to remember those affected by residential schools. Reconciliation Committee Co-Chair Amanda Scout says the city is moving in the right direction.
Back, it was in June, we became an official committee of council and actually got a budget. So that just shows us the commitment from our city that it really is willing to be a part of this for the next 10 years.
The Reconciliation Committee has proposed a budget of $50,000 for 2019 and every year going forward. That is up from the current $25,000. The Lethbridge College Food Bank and the City Food Bank are reaping the rewards from a group of very hardworking gardeners. For the past 8 years, the group of seniors from the Bhutanese community have been working in this garden located on the grounds of Lethbridge College as a way to be active and give back to the community. In the fall, they harvest their crops and donate all of the proceeds to the food banks of Lethbridge College and the city.
The reaction is they're very excited to be a part of the community. Every week it's like, how much can they water? How much can they weed? They really want to donate back a lot of vegetables back to the community. So it gives you that sense of pride.
Absolutely amazing. There's 30, 40 Bhutanese seniors that help us out on a yearly basis, and they want nothing at the end of it. They'll leave today with maybe a couple handfuls of tomatoes, potatoes, but I think just getting outside and enjoying the weather and good old Canadian fresh air, and it's just a great program we have.
Last year, the gardeners donated about 1,000 pounds of food to the two food banks and are hoping to meet or exceed that amount this year. The Chamber of Commerce is reaching out to nonprofit groups as we inch closer to the Christmas season. The Santa's Wish List is officially underway. It's a program that connects nonprofit agencies with businesses looking to make charitable contributions. Applications are now open and will be on until November the 19th. Nonprofit agencies that are interested can go to the Chamber of Commerce website to apply. Board Director Tara Lennox says the idea to start the program was an easy decision.
We have a membership of 800 local businesses, and a lot of those groups too, I don't know what percentage, but a significant, some are nonprofit organizations. So it's about one of the key elements of the chamber is connecting businesses, networking, expanding everybody's connections in the community. And so with nonprofit organizations, they do have a specific need, and there's other ones that are very much for-profit businesses. So why wouldn't we?
Though applications are active, the official launch of the program will come at the Opportunity South Summit on October the 3rd. The University of Lethbridge is receiving a financial boost from the federal government to support its Destination Exploration program. The 3-year, $54,000 investment will support science, technology, engineering, and math for kids kindergarten to grade 8. The Traveling Lab Coats program reaches about 700 to 800 students annually through science clubs, summer camps, and even birthday parties. The TLC program runs in May and June of each year. In total, close to $12 million in funding was awarded for 163 grants across the country. The annual Terry Fox Run was held in our city yesterday. Despite the rain, 121 people participated in the event. A total of $9,000 was raised for the Terry Fox Foundation. To date, over $700 million has been raised for cancer research in Terry's name. The annual Terry Fox Run is held in over 9,000 communities across Canada. A 6-year-old Saskatchewan girl who was the subject of an Amber Alert overnight has been found safe. Emma O'Keefe was an autistic and epileptic child, and she was discovered this morning in North Battleford nearly 14 hours after a sport utility vehicle she was in was stolen from in front of a store in the same city. RCMP, the SUV was found in an industrial area. Crews are looking for an airplane that went missing on a flight from Edmonton to Chilliwack, BC, have narrowed the area where they're looking. They initially focused the search on the Highway 5 corridor between Chilliwack and Valemount, BC, but they're now looking between Clearwater and Valemount based on radar and cell tower information. The Joint Rescue Coordination Center says it was notified Friday that a small private aircraft went missing. The manager of the Parkland Airport near Edmonton says the plane's pilot has been to the airport a few times over the last couple of years. A second person now faces murder charges in the death of a man in Fort McMurray earlier this year. John Bradley Healy was found dead last June, and police said last month that a 36-year-old Fort McMurray man was arrested and faces a charge of first-degree murder. Police say the 39-year-old Bernard Corrigan was arrested Friday in the death of Healy and also faces the charges of first-degree murder. Corrigan appeared in provincial court earlier today. Paralyzed Humboldt Broncos player Ryan Strechnitsky returned to the ice in his first sledge hockey game at a charity event over the weekend. Strechnitsky was injured in the April 6th bus crash, which killed 16 people and injured 13 others.
I was actually excited. I saw everyone. I didn't expect that much, but just the support is just absolutely amazing. I can't thank anyone enough. The music was going, the fans were loud, so it was just like playing in Humboldt again. Brought back a lot of memories. When I was 5 years old and laced up the skates, it was some of the happiest times of my life, and I was back out there again and just enjoying the moment.
South of the border, 7 people, including children, were injured when a startled camel started bucking during a Pittsburgh circus. Officials say 2 children and an adult were riding the camel during an intermission yesterday at the Shrine Circus when it became startled. In total, 6 children and 1 adult were taken to hospital. The animal was brought under control and the circus resumed. The circus was on its 3rd and final day. The death toll from Hurricane Florence has risen to 17 as officials say a 3-month-old died in North Carolina when a tree landed on a mobile home.
She was holding him, and that's when she was struck by the tree. The tree had divided us. I'm in the kitchen and she's in the living room on the couch. I had to come out and rip the air conditioner out the window, and that's when we handed him, took him through the window.
They'd been doing CPR for the last 30 minutes, and they just wanted permission to stop. Said no at first, but after another 30 minutes, he wouldn't come back. He was a fighter in the beginning. He come 5 weeks early, survived the NICU, 10 days.
We was watching the trees in the back, that's leaning.
I even moved the living room around to make sure his swing wasn't in the path of these trees. Take it serious and don't chance just because trees don't look weak, obviously they are.
South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster is warning of dangers from rising rivers and flash floods. Some North Carolina mobile home residents were told to evacuate on Sunday.
Those rivers in North Carolina that have received heavy rainfall are coming our way, as are our own rivers, which are gathering water now from the ground in streams and tributaries and creeks. And they have not crested, they have not even begun yet, but they will. And the question is, how high will the water be? And we do not know. But there's another danger, and it's here now, and that's known as a flash flood. A flash flood is called a flash flood because it comes and goes in a flash, and you never know where it's going to be, but it'll be in a low-lying area.
I don't have a home now. It's gone. I have to make a sailboat or something.
I'm concerned for my neighbors around here. Yeah, of course, because you know some are on limited incomes, fixed incomes, of course, and some have the insurance to cover whatever is going to happen, and some don't.
Many residents in Fayetteville, North Carolina, who stayed in their homes to ride out Florence are now being told they have to evacuate due to rising floodwaters. One resident showed how she's preparing her house for likely flooding.
Basically, I just stacked up the chairs because I was thinking maybe if we did flood, it'd probably just come up to here, just to save a little bit of what I have. I stacked the chairs up, took everything off the ground. Basically, what is that? Maybe like a foot above. And anything that was like that closest to the doors. We're gonna take stuff out of the freezer, but I pulled the fridge, and if you have an ice maker, that's gonna leak if the power goes out. So we took that out, just put it in the sink so everything could drain, and you won't have water damage and things like, which you probably will anyway because of the flood, but every little bit helps.
A typhoon which killed 70 people in the Philippines has now slammed into Hong Kong. More than 2.4 million people have been evacuated in southern China to flee the massive typhoon. Close to 50,000 fishing boats were called back to port. The Hong Kong Observatory warned people to stay away from the Victoria Harbor, where storm surges battered the sandbank reinforced waterfront. When it comes to immigration and allowing thousands of asylum seekers into Canada, there's one former professor from Simon Fraser University who says it's not necessarily a good thing. Herbert Grubel says when we take the brightest and best that Syria has to offer, we're doing that country a disservice.
We are not doing the people of Syria a service by taking the best, the brightest, the most energetic, the healthiest. We go into these refugee camps and pick them out and send them to Canada. We should responsibly finance and make life as comfortable as possible in these refugee camps and encourage them. And what they all want to do, they all want to go home to rebuild their country.
Watch my full interview with Mr. Grubel as we discuss illegal border crossers and how it's impacting Canadians coming up in the second half of our show. A 10-year veteran of the U.S. Border Patrol is being held on $2.5 million bond. He's accused of killing at least 4 women and injuring a 5th who escaped.
There's probable cause to believe that this individual is responsible for this series of murders, which I would qualify as a serial murder that we have. So we will be looking at what charges to put on him, potentially 4 charges of murder and aggravated kidnapping.
It was on this date that the TV series MASH premiered. Israel and Egypt's leaders signed Camp David Accords, and singer Hank Williams was born. This is Today in History for September the 17th.
September 17th, 1862. What's considered the single bloodiest day in American history takes place during the Civil War. That's when Union forces repel a Confederate invasion of Maryland in the Battle of Antietam. More than 20,000 soldiers on both sides are either killed, captured, wounded, or end up missing during the 12-hour battle. 1787. In Philadelphia, the Constitutional Convention completes work on the U.S. Constitution. The new charter for the new nation takes effect after a majority of the then 13 states ratifies it the following year. 1978. In Washington, a major breakthrough for Mideast peace at the White House. That's where Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat signed the Camp David Accords. The agreement provides a framework for the first peace treaty between Israel and one of its Arab neighbors. 1923.
Say, hey, good looking, what you got cooking?
Hank Williams, the singer and guitarist, who remains one of the giants of country music, is born in Alabama. And 1972, MASH, the sitcom set at a U.S. Army hospital during the Korean War, begins an 11-season run on CBS. Today in History, September 17th. Camille Bohannon, The Associated Press.
Unseasonably cool again today, and more rain is in the forecast. I'll have your complete weather picture coming up in just a moment. A mixture of sun and cloud today. Tonight, partly cloudy with a low near 2. Tomorrow, rain will develop with a high near 9. Wednesday, the showers should taper off, bringing a high near 12. Thursday, the showers return with their mercury dropping to 9. Mainly cloudy on Friday with a high near 8 expected. Saturday, a good chance of rain or even flurries developing with a high again near 8 degrees. Checking our almanac, the average high for this time of year is 20 degrees and an average low of 5. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1981 at 33 degrees and the record low -2 in 2003. Sunrise was at 7:10, sunset at 7:42. Let's have a look at national temperatures for tomorrow now. It'll be mainly cloudy and 16 in Vancouver. Victoria will be mainly sunny and 17. A good chance of rain in Calgary and only a high of 7 for tomorrow. Edmonton will be mainly cloudy and 8. A good chance of showers and a high of 11 in Regina on Tuesday. Saskatoon will be mainly overcast and 9. Much warmer in Winnipeg, mainly cloudy and 16 is on tap for Tuesday. Over in the central part of the country, quite warm in Toronto. Sun mixed with cloud and a high near 28. Ottawa will be mainly cloudy and 26. Montreal will be hot and humid as well, as they should get up to 27 degrees. Over in the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have some shower activity in 24. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be mainly cloudy in 28. Charlottetown, PEI will have some rain in 24. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, it'll be rainy and 7 degrees. Some Alberta farmers are concerned with their crops after late summer snowfall blanketed parts of the province. Greg Sears has been growing canola, wheat and barley by Grande Prairie for about a decade, and he recently had about 15 centimeters of snow cover his crops. It pushed down his cereal and canola and froze anything that wasn't fully mature. Sears says the area needs warm, windy weather. Adding ground conditions will make it hard to get equipment on the land. He was hoping his barley would go to a malt beer brewing market, but now expects it will land elsewhere at a lower price. National home sales were up 0.9% in August over the previous month, led by gains in Edmonton, Toronto, and Montreal. A recent report by the Canadian Real Estate Association says those monthly increases are starting to diminish. CREA says sales were down 3.8% from the same month last year. That was mainly due to declines in British Columbia. The MLS Home Price Index edged up 2.5% year over year. As MPs return to Parliament Hill, Conservative House Leader Candice Bergen says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has managed to upset a lot of people during NAFTA negotiations.
We were able to negotiate CETA as well as CPTPP while still maintaining the pillars of supply management. What I can tell you we have to do is you have to have a good, strong relationship with your trading partners. You have to go in recognizing the position that you're in. You have to know if there's going to be some concessions, know ahead what those might be, know what you can get and not get. What the Prime Minister has done in these trade relationships is he's just seemed to tick a lot of people off. We almost didn't get TPP. You will recall that Japan was extremely angry at the Prime Minister and what he did. We're seeing a relationship, a key relationship with the U.S., which we should be building on the good relationship that we have. And again, Trudeau has known, certainly we all understand that Trump can be who Trump is, but the Prime Minister sure didn't help the situation.
How would the Conservative approach with Donald Trump be different than what Justin Trudeau is doing?
Well, we have a very respectful and grateful relationship that we have with our U.S. counterparts, and we certainly wouldn't have gone in and started to lecture on things like gender rights and the environment.
NAFTA negotiations do continue between Canada and the United States. So far, no deal has been struck. Award-winning journalist Michael Coren says at this point, there's no guarantee that NAFTA will survive.
I will be stunned if NAFTA, as we know it, survives. I mean, there may be something between the three countries, but it won't resemble NAFTA. And it will affect people in media, I mean, things that we've taken for granted. I don't even know if there will be a pact between three countries. I think we'll know by the end of September, but I'm not a betting man. If I was, I wouldn't put money on it.
Catch my full interview with Mr. Coren as we discuss trade and how our economy is performing coming up after business news. Now here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, an Ontario Liberal MP is crossing the floor to the Conservatives. MP Leona Olislev said she was frustrated with the government's leadership on key files like the economy and foreign affairs. Olislev is a graduate of the Royal Military College and is a former captain in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer has given Olislev the portfolio of Global Security Shadow Minister. When you see news happening, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top stories, check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca. The delay in getting an NAFTA deal done is having a negative impact on a wide variety of Canadian industries, including the auto sector. One of our Toronto contributors, Michael Coren, has details next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Do you have a heart to serve our community? Streets Alive Mission is looking for volunteers to help serve hot meals, assist with Foot Friday, and help sort incoming donations. Visit streetsalive.ca to fill out their volunteer application or call 403-320-1159. The 12th annual Friends of Interfaith Charity Dinner and Silent Auction is taking place Friday, September 28th at the Italian-Canadian Cultural Centre. A prime rib dinner begins at 7 p.m. with a silent auction being held throughout. Enjoy dinner music by Dale Ketchison and other musical entertainment by Trevor Panzak. Tickets are $75 each and are available online at interfaithfoodbank.ca. The 29th Annual Giant Pumpkin Festival and Auction in support of the Children's Wish Foundation is taking place Saturday, September 29th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Green Haven Garden Center. Come out and enjoy face painting, wagon rides, a petting zoo, plus a live and silent auction, and much more. Currently, they're seeking sponsorships, auction donations, and volunteers to help make this day a success. For more information, contact Jamie at 403-795-4339. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
NAFTA talks continue, and so far there's no deal between Canada and the United States. The Americans do have a deal, however, with Mexico, but so far our country's on the outside looking in. Joining me now to discuss this about trade is award-winning journalist Michael Coren. Michael, joining me once again from Toronto. Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland says they're making progress, but I mean, come on, it's been 13 months. What's the problem? Is it because the feds are protecting Quebec's dairy industry, preventing us from getting a deal done?
I think that's part of it, but there's a lot going on here. I mean, Chrystia Freeland has said there is no rush, which, famous last words. There is a bit of a rush, and Trump is a man in a hurry. He always has been in politics and outside of it. He has a deal with Mexico, and it could be bilateral. Now, he has said, I'm more than willing to bring Canada into this, to add a C to all of this, but is he? I don't really know. Remember, we have earned, I think, $300 million in tariffs recently from the US. However, that will be reflected on the price of goods in Canada. Look, this is very serious. If we can't sell our cars at a very good rate, the Americans, It's not going to ruin Canada. We don't believe what Trump says, but it's going to hit us very hard indeed, particularly the workforce. I think, and I suspect this is happening, that we are looking at other markets because we cannot depend on America. That's not just Canada, by the way, and it's not just trade. Politically, diplomatically, in all sorts of ways, countries that said America was their best friend are beginning to question that.
You know, I'm glad you brought up the auto sector because, yes, it would impact a lot of jobs since so many GM, Ford, Toyota, Honda vehicles are made in Canada and make their way to the United States.
Oh, yeah, and it's all over the country. I'm speaking to you from Toronto. I lived in Oshawa the first year I came to Canada. Oshawa is a GM town. Yeah. I drive through Oakville most days of the week. Oakville, I mean, they're all over the country. But let's not, it's not doom and gloom here. Americans still want to buy well-made cars. They want to buy North American well-made cars, and those cars are well-made in Canada. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Trump in the months to come. He has other things to worry about. But I'd be very surprised if we had a deal by the end of September. Now, I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I don't see much progress being made. I mean, every time there's a picture of Chrystia Freeland walking very purposefully forward, you know she's actually going to say, yep, we're really working on this. But nothing seems to be achieved. But I don't think for a minute it's because the Canadian diplomatic corps and culture and the negotiating team are not trying. It's very hard to get to Trump, remember. He's surrounded by people, and they're not all yes men. So there's a filter all around him.
You know, some people actually believe that Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland may be in a little over her head. What are your thoughts here?
There is a funny comeback to that, but I'm not going to indulge in that. No, I don't think that's true, actually. You probably interviewed her. I certainly did when she was a journalist, both in the UK and the US. She's one of the most astute politicians on the Canadian scene. There are a lot of Canadian politicians, I've got to be honest with you, and I think to myself, good Lord, I mean, what are your qualifications? But she really understands financial politics, the world of business. No, she's not. And the other point is, it's not just her. She is the political, visible aspect of all this. There's a whole team of people. They're not liberal, they're not conservative, they're not New Democrat. They're simply business people, they're experts in the field. So I certainly wouldn't say it's about personality. And when we speak of, you know, if anything gives me a bit of faith in Canadian politics, it's someone like her.
Now, early in the negotiation process, U.S. President Donald Trump said he'd be willing to talk to Canada first about a bilateral trade deal, but the Prime Minister said, nope, forget it. We're not going to go it alone. We want to have Mexico join us. So then Trump says, okay, I'm going to talk trade with Mexico. Mexico said, see, let's do this. So should Ottawa be angry with Mexico?
I don't know if I believe what was said initially. I mean, I with all due respect to him, I'm not going to believe what Donald Trump has to say. Look, there was a deal between three countries. United States, Mexico, and Canada, and it's the moral code of Canada to say no. But at the same time, they're very pragmatic and realistic. And I'm sure if Trump had come to Ottawa and said, "This is the deal; it's a great one," we would have taken it. No, Trump is playing games. Look. If you read about how he operated in business, he's a narcissist, and it's all about winning. And he's trying to play people off against each other. He's detested in Mexico. I mean, he's not liked in Canada either, but in Mexico, there's a visceral dislike of the man. But what he's trying to do is, say, look, I've got to deal with Mexico. If you want to come in Canada, you have to compromise. Is he a good businessman? I don't know. I mean, I've seen both points of view. But right now, his base is loving it. The American economy is not being hurt by it, but frankly, neither is the Canadian.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, the American economy added over 200,000 jobs. The Canadian economy lost over 50,000 jobs. So he might be doing something right down south of the border.
Well, yes, but you know what it's like. It's very much up and down. Ontario is doing quite well. The jobs that were lost were not permanent. The Canadian economy is doing okay. But I have to say, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but they have added quite a few jobs. Now, it may well be that what has happened is not really pertinent to the policies of Donald Trump. It's about a certain economic upswing. 200,000 sounds like a huge number. In American terms, it's not really. They could lose that very quickly too.
Now, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney has been acting as a trade advisor to Justin Trudeau. Do you think that's helping or maybe hindering the process?
It's a very good question because I think Brian Mulroney is internationally respected, but he also is a man of his era. And he was absolutely committed to free trade. If you think going back to the 80s, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, Brian Mulroney, there is a new political and business culture in the world, dominated by North America and the Anglosphere and the UK, and it's all going to be about free trade. He's committed to that, so he will fight for that. Now, maybe he has to compromise, and we could ask, is he the man for the job? Do we need a more modern figure? Because he was Prime Minister, more than a generation ago, and times have changed a great deal. I also think that Brian Mulroney, and I know many people criticize him, but I think when it comes to ethics and morality and integrity, he might be quite shocked by Donald Trump.
Now, a major sticking point in negotiations has been Trump's demand of the sunset clause. The deal essentially only good for, about 5 years. Do you think Trump has maybe softened his stance a little bit on that?
I don't know, but look, it's all artificial anyway, because first of all, is he going to win another term in office? American presidents can only serve for 8 years. They have to be re-elected. I'm not sure if he will. So the whole point, it's like signing a contract with a sports team for 5 years. Yeah, unless someone comes in and buys out that contract. Nothing is permanent in trade and business. And there'll even be a clause, my golly, a notwithstanding type of clause. Why does that come to mind in Ontario? So I don't think that's permanent. No, and I don't think anybody would say a deal would rest on that. And look, it's very likely that Justin Trudeau will be re-elected, particularly with a divided Conservative movement, but that's not guaranteed either. A new government comes in, everything is on the table.
A lot of people say when the United States sneezes, Canada catches a cold. That's how intertwined our economies are. So with Canada potentially signing a trade deal with the United States, will that help kickstart our economy that much more?
We've always had that, well, always, for a very long time now. And we can be more specific. It's actually probably 4 or 5 states on the border that we do so much of our trade with. It works the other way. Although America is a superpower, America is also terrified of Chinese expansion. Every time you read about what America's trying to do abroad, the Chinese have got there first, often taking American ideas and producing them quicker and cheaper and more efficiently. So it's not as though America is saying, we're on top and maybe we'll let you guys in. America also has to stabilize its economy and its trading partners, because Russia, again, if we look at foreign affairs, Russia is now trusted in regions where America isn't. So we're not equal partners. I'm not going to say that. That will be unrealistic. But nor is it one superpower and one little guy. There's more equality than that.
I mean, there's no arguing that the United States has been one of Canada's biggest trading partners for a very long time now. But as you mentioned earlier, are there other markets we should potentially look forward to? I mean, the European Union, that's quite a ways away, touching some of the European nations. How about South America?
I think it's essential. Brazil and Argentina in particular. And I mean, Brazil has enormous problems of a polarized population. You have great poverty and great wealth. But Brazil economically, 10 years ago, less. People were talking of Brazil as an emerging economic superpower. But I think we have to trade particularly with Brazil and Argentina. They're the major economies there. But also, you mentioned distance, but that's not necessarily such a problem. We have to develop stronger links with India, which we are doing. The one we have to work harder on, though, is China. China is a post-communist society now. Within 10 years, there'll be virtually no communism left. And the economy will simply explode. Everything will, by the way. You'll see a religious explosion. So much is going on. We have to look to China. China is open for business. China wants stability, and wherever it sees stability, and we have that in Canada, it will trade. I'm not saying that they're always the fairest trading partner, but we simply can't turn away from an economy that big.
Now, speaking of Asian nations, how about with the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement? How about maybe some of the other Asian nations like Japan and Vietnam? Maybe some of those countries as well.
Japan is not, of course, a power it used to be economically, but it's a large country. But you mentioned Vietnam, and that is interesting because countries that at one point we did no business with at all are emerging, and they're stable. We're always nervous of a change of government, of some sort of revolution, but Vietnam is now a stable country with a people, a population who want to spend. Now, this is very recent, by the way. Now, South Korea, again, who knows what will happen long term with Korea, but South Korea, we could do a lot better there. We have relied far too much on the United States, and I don't blame anybody for that because it all seems so comfortable. Well, it's worrying now we have to look elsewhere, but in the long term, that might be a good thing because expanding our economic base, realizing that we're 35 million people, population is growing, to look abroad in terms of initiative, it provokes, it motivates, and we can't depend on anyone apart from ourselves. I'm not being pessimistic here, but in the long term, understandably, the United States will look to its own interests. We have to as well.
So bottom line, Michael, will NAFTA be saved, or will Canada just work on maybe bilateral trade deals with the United States and Mexico separately?
I will be stunned if NAFTA as we know it survives. I mean, there may be something between the three countries, but it won't resemble NAFTA. And it will affect people in media, I mean, things that we've taken for granted. I don't even know if there will be a pact between three countries. I think we'll know by the end of September, but I'm not a betting man. If I was, I wouldn't put money on it.
One of our regular contributors, Michael Coran, on his way to the UK, but right now joining me via Skype from Toronto. Thanks a lot, Michael.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, let's talk a bit about immigration to Canada. The federal government has been criticized for its handling of the increasing number of asylum seekers illegally crossing our border from the United States. Also, how it's handled the Syrian refugees trying to integrate into our society. Canada does need immigrants, but how can we improve the system? Joining me now via Skype from Vancouver is Herbert Grubel, a former professor of economics at Simon Fraser University. He also served as a Reform Party MP for Capilano, BC back in the 1990s. Welcome to BCN.
Thank you very much, Hal.
Now, Canada likely does need more immigration considering our low birth rate. Any thoughts on what really needs to change in how we process immigrants so that we maybe make it a right fit for Canada?
Well, first of all, I disagree with the fact that we need more immigrants, but I don't want to devote the 15 minutes that we have to that topic. There's a much, much more important topic, a topic which the people who live outside of the big cities of Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto are not aware of. We have a large number of immigrants that is so big that we are now suffering the consequences of mass immigration. I'm not against immigration. I am worried, and I see the consequences of having mass immigration. Let me tell you what that implies. Every week, notice this, every week in Vancouver metropolitan area, 300 immigrant families are settling. Every week. From now on until we change our policies. They have done this for the last 20 years.
Now, do we know where they're coming from? Is it from Syria, from Iraq, war-torn countries?
It doesn't matter. The topic is they have all been selected on the basis of being good economic contributors. They aren't. But the most important thing is, what is the greatest complaint that Canadians have about their country, about living in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal? It is high cost of housing. Where do these 300 families a week live? They add to the demand for housing, and they drive it up. They add to the demand for hospitals, for schools, for roads, for recreation facilities. And of course, people who love immigrants say, oh, all we have to do is build more infrastructure, build more housing. Well, we've been trying very hard to catch up with the demand for housing, but it's being driven up because in some areas in Vancouver, for example, are running out of land.
Well, and in Toronto as well, Mayor John Tory was really concerned about the amount of immigrants coming in. They had to put them in dorms, college dorms, because there was just no place to house them. And now, like you said, infrastructure has to be built in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and a lot of the big centers here in Canada.
Well, and one reason why we're not building them is because our fiscal capacity is strained. And one of the most important books I've ever written was published by the Fraser Institute, which showed, using government statistics, that the average immigrant pays only 50% of the income taxes that the average Canadian does. But they demand the same amount of government services that the average Canadian demands. So we have a gap 5 years ago of 6,000 per immigrant per year. That adds up to a fiscal burden on you and me and everybody who's listening to this broadcast of over 30 billion a year. 30 billion a year. That is an enormous amount of money. That's more than we spend, much more than we spend on defense. So how do we get into this? Well, we're allegedly selecting immigrants on the basis of their education, their skills, their health, whether they're young and whatnot.
Or if they're persecuted, right? To get them away from their country persecution.
Yeah, but in fact, they represent 10% of the total. The other ones are allegedly pre-selected. Well, let me tell you, of those 300,000 a year, only a quarter are economically pre-selected. The rest are their spouses, their offspring, children under 20, and worst of all, their parents and grandparents, who not only don't contribute anything to output, but demand a lot of government services. So as a result of this, we get that $30 billion a year deficit. And we are simply not able to catch up in our construction of these infrastructure and housing to meet the demand so that we don't get stuck on the bridge every day.
Some immigration is good, however. I know when I first moved to Lethbridge, Alberta, there's a shortage of doctors. No doctors, not accepting any new patients. So we finally found a doctor who immigrated to Canada, is fairly new to Canada, has all of her credentials, and she's wonderful. So, I mean, in that regard, you do need some immigration here, and people who are professionals, but not those who come here that just end up on our social assistance programs.
No, it's not. Let's not say that there are any more social assistance needs for the immigrants. But, you know, the doctors, well, the 300 a week families are coming, they all need doctors, right? One reason why we have a doctor shortage is because we have millions of people who have come here, and a few of them are doctors, but we might not have any need for immigrant doctors if we didn't have all these immigrants that are demanding medical services. Now, let me also talk briefly, as you started off, this is a common perception that we need them as workers. Well, if
it helps the GDP, absolutely. More workers, right?
Yeah, but why would I care about GDP? What you and I should be caring about is GDP per capita after taxes, right? So if I were an employer, I would certainly love lots and lots of immigrants who press down wages, and I can hire them more cheaply. So they are all in favor of it. But assume for a moment we didn't have immigrant workers to do this work. Well, what would happen? You'd have wages go up in the fields where now no Canadian wants to work. That's always the argument, you see. These immigrants fill jobs that no Canadian wants. Well, wages would go up. People would retire later. Younger people would start earlier. Labor force participation among women would increase because wages are higher. They would be higher because there wasn't all this supply pushing down the wages. So what else would happen? Well, you would get robots taken over everywhere. We already are seeing some of this. You look at McDonald's, they already have kiosks. They don't need any more cashiers. The supermarkets all have automatic cashiers. Soon, if the price of labor was high enough, we would have robots flipping the hamburgers.
But you know what? I think a lot of that's to do with technology as well nowadays, you know? A lot of it's technology, like in the banks, you've got the ATM machines. We're talking about autonomous vehicles now. So, I mean, it's just technology
But that means we don't need these workers. It would work just as well. And in fact, what is happening is because the immigrants keep the wages so low, the incentives to install labor-saving devices is much less than it is in Japan and other places where they have low birth rates, but no immigration.
So let me ask you something. So you're against obviously the illegal immigrants crossing the border and, settling into different areas of the country, like we said. How about the ones like my parents? They came over from Europe. They went through the entire process. Those who are seeking to legally immigrate to Canada, what do you say to them? You want to keep them away as well?
No, I am not even against legal immigrants from Asia. What I am against is 300,000 or 350,000, as they are promising for next year, a year from India, wherever they want to come from. It's too much. Our economy can't handle it. The absorptive capacity is exceeded. So my argument is the biggest problem we have to face, and the biggest policy change I would recommend for Bernier, was lower temporarily the number of immigrants to 100,000 and let us catch up, building roads, bridges, hospitals, etc., etc., until we can have a more normal life. We don't face all these problems. And then let's rediscuss whether we should have 100,000 or maybe even 50,000, or whether we should have 300,000.
You know, there's another issue as well. The Federal Auditor General has criticized the government for its inability to track whether the 50,000 Syrian refugees have access to education or receiving social assistance. How many are working? How many have learned English or French? How did this happen? We lost track of those 50,000.
Well, I don't want to bash the Liberals and the bureaucracy, but you see, it is typical of people outside of the big cities, and also many of the immigrants, that you're concerned about the welfare of these illegal immigrants, of these refugees. That's a relatively minor issue. It's a matter of time before they're being taken care of. Very expensive, but they will be taken care of. We are losing track of the main issue, that we cannot absorb mass immigration of 300,000 a year. 300 new families settling in the metropolitan area of Vancouver every week.
So you're really concerned about...
I'm not aware of this.
So you're concerned about the strain on the healthcare system, the education system, and
road, housing,
taking jobs away. Is that those your biggest concerns?
No, as an economist, I must say that's not a problem. They all find work, but at wages which don't pay into enough tax payments to take care of all the benefits they're getting from the government. Even if they don't have an extra tendency to get welfare or anything of that sort than the average Canadian. It's simply a fiscal burden due to the fact that they don't have these incomes high enough. Even though we make every effort to select them, that they will. They are not, these are statistics that I give you. I don't make them up. They are officially available on Statistics Canada websites.
So where do you think a lot of these refugees who want to claim asylum status here in Canada, fleeing persecution, where should they go instead of Canada?
Look, let's talk about refugee policy. There is wide agreement among people that I deal with who say, we are doing a very bad service to Syria. What we should be doing is, we should be spending a fraction of what they cost us in terms of fiscal burden and give it to the United Nations to run refugee camps in the Middle East. Let them be there until the war will end. And I can assure you, all wars end eventually. Then they will go back where they are needed much, much more than they are in North America to rebuild their country. We are not doing the people of Syria a service by taking the best, the brightest, the most energetic, the healthiest. We go into these refugee camps and pick them out and send them to Canada. We should responsibly finance and make life as comfortable as possible in these refugee camps and encourage them. And what they all want to do, they all want to go home to rebuild their country.
A lot of them, yeah, that's their big concern is when they come over to Canada, they have to integrate, learn a new language, integrate into our culture. And that's a real challenge for a lot of these new refugees.
Well, I'm not an expert on the psychology and problems of refugees. I can understand it. But they will all overcome it eventually, and their children will be doing fine. So that I think is again a problem that is concerned to those many compassionate Canadians who are so proud of their culture of compassion to the rest of the world. But the rest of the world is so big. The numbers that we are taking are so small. And the harm we're doing to the rebuilding of these countries by taking their best and brightest to come to Canada, it outweighs these concerns. We're actually doing harm. False application of compassion.
When I lived in the Niagara region in southern Ontario, a lot of business owners I knew there, they hired a lot of Mexican immigrants to come in and pick the apples because nobody else wanted to do that job specifically, and they were very thankful for the work that they had. So what do you say to those business owners that say, no, I like bringing in the immigrants because they have a wonderful service for my business?
Of course. If I were a businessman, I would also, and I would lobby Ottawa to continue and increase the numbers. But the fact is, the reason they can't get workers is because they don't pay enough. And the wages they are forced to pay are being kept down because these workers are there. If they couldn't find any workers, which is doubtful, we would also have machinery to pick everything. In California, when they prevented agricultural workers from picking tomatoes, they developed tomato picking machines. And when the tomato picking machines punctured and destroyed the tomato, damaged the tomatoes badly enough, they developed tomatoes which were resistant to this. And today, labor shortages may be there, but the tomato industry is saved. Same way the apple industry will be saved.
Former Simon Fraser Economics University professor Herbert Grubel, thanks a lot for joining me today from Vancouver.
My pleasure. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.